Good evening. My name is Asam. I am first year MBA student in Southern University with a concentration in accounting and also supply chain management. I am presently I work with the state of Louisiana in the Division of Administration's office. I graduated from LSU with an accounting degree. This evening, I'm happy to be with you, social beings, and it's a social being. Yes, man is a social being, and I use the term man in a generic sense to include both female and male genders. We are social beings because we interact with one another. We go to church together, we eat together, we go to sporting events together, and so that makes us social beings. And our interaction can be voluntary or involuntary without us knowing. And each interaction is determined by our personal characteristics, our environment, and our belief systems. These characteristics will be our belief systems, our environment, or our assumptions about some people. It could be with people we already know. It could be with people we are meeting them for the first time. It could be people who are far off or who are nearer to us. We interact with them. And these interactions can go good or they can go bad. And there are many things that make these interactions to be good or to be bad. This evening, I'm going to talk to you about my personal reflections on the Super Soul Conversations podcast, in which Oprah Winfrey interviewed the author of Talking to Strangers, Malcolm Gladwell, who is a revisionist, and he is an author, and he has his own podcast. He's a five-time winner of the New York Times best-selling author. And so we're going to reflect on this podcast and bring out some certain points. Now, this podcast has, when I listen to it, it has some main points that it highlighted about what was going on in that book. And the first main point that I'm going to talk here is about there are main points of faulty assumptions, wrong perceptions of people. There are also main points of prejudgment and sexual assault. So these are the main points here. Let's get into it. The first main point I said is poor communication. Imagine, there is a saying that somebody says, you think you've heard what I said, but what I said is not what I meant. You see, so people already have some sort of conceptions about how they are going to approach certain things and how they communicate. And when the communications goes wrong, people are trying to understand one another and they are unable to understand, the communication goes wrong, and what happens can be very disastrous. Our communications are also guided by our biases, unconscious biases, our consciences, and many other things. And so these things, when they don't meet with one another, we cannot understand, we cannot pass the meaning. What happens is there's miscommunication and a breakdown in communication, and we'll have problems, which could be disastrous or they could be poor. There are also where, due to these misconceptions of poor communication, for example, the author brings a case of Sandra Bland. We've all heard about that case. It made the headlines. It was racially motivated because, and first of all, it was racially motivated, and secondly, there was poor communication in it. And since they could not understand each other, it led to Sandra Bland being handcuffed and taken to a Texas jail where she committed suicide and died. And this is due to poor communication, due to the prejudgment of other people, especially strangers, whom we have never met whom we have just met for the first time. This is wrong. There is also wrong perception of people. We take the case of Amanda Knox. These cases I'm giving to you are cases that the author uses to highlight, to espouse all of these wrong conceptions, all of these things that make talking to strangers so difficult. He uses Amanda Knox's case. Amanda Knox, if you remember, is an exchange student who was in Italy with her roommate, and the roommate died. And people believe that because Amanda Knox did not show an outward regret, and they felt that she is culpable. She also took part, or she plotted the death of her roommate. Meanwhile, that might not be so. Deep in her mind, she was feeling the remorse of it, but it's already been prejudged by the people, the public, that she is at fault or she is culpable. Her hand, she took part in all of that. We remember the case of Jerry Sandusky, the Penn State sexual molester, and we know that molesters are deceivers. They deceive and cajole children and people into taking part in their sexual acts. This has a long effect. Now, Jerry Sandusky was arrested and he's serving a jail term. But the long arm of the law, because of the prejudgment or wrong conception people have, that those who were around him, the administrators of the Penn State University, whom they believe that they heard the story and did nothing, the law is going against them. They want to get them and probably put them in prison. Those prejudgments about because they were friends or co-workers with Jerry Sandusky, they believe that they are culpable also. These are the conceptions in our society which they are not good. Poor communication, sexual assault, racial profiling in the case of Sandra Bland, and Malcolm Gladwell builds the whole of this book around Sandra Bland. He made it the frame of the book. And so these are those main points which this podcast highlights. But there are also issues which are confusing to me when I listen to the podcast, which are confusing or unclear to me. He makes mention of what he calls default truth, that people tend to believe you, people tend to, what he's saying is that the response that people give, the first response that people give to a question being asked them is truthful. It boggles my mind because we have belief systems, we have prejudged some other people, and we say whatever that person does is wrong or bad. So how does he say that the first response that are asked to either a pedophile or somebody who is a racist will be the truth? No, to me, that is very unclear to me. However, he goes further to say, when I read there's something new again, and it is still this truth, default truth, that people are in a position to tell the truth the first time that they are asked. So this is a new thing to me, and it has changed my perception, my mindset. Now I am tuned to, when I ask my children certain things, I'll believe what they say first. My wife, my brothers and sisters, my friends, my colleagues, I'll believe them first before going perhaps to ask more questions to see where they might falter, but the first is that. And there are issues that I would like to go further, issues that I would like to carry out further research on, such as that default truth. I would like to carry out good research on it to see how it actually works. There is also a connection between what I have learned in this thing in class about the podcast and what I've learned outside, which is outside the class topics that we have treated. Take, for example, in 2016, we have Charles Kinsey. Charles Kinsey is an African American, a black American, and he is a therapist. Now, he has his client who ran away from the therapist's home and went to the public, to the main road, to the street, and they had called police, and the police, he was playing, the patient is an autistic patient, and he had a toy he was playing with, and the police were they were called, while Charles Kingsley saw this and ran out to shelter and protect his client and was shouting that, please don't shoot. I and my client, none of us has an arm, none of us has a gun. Yet, one of the white police officers shot him 3 times on his leg. And this escalated. He shot him 3 times on his leg. And when Charles Kingsley asked the police officer later on in the hospital, why did you shoot me? The police officer said, I don't know. This is prejudgment. This is racial profiling. This is poor communication. All the points that is. And these things, Malcolm Gladwell says, these things have been going on for too long. They have become familiar in our society. I would like to research more also on this, going back to the other point, to research why only the black Americans and the minority are always the victims of killings and social profiling. And there is no solution to it. So that is a connection. My personal experience with this podcast and my personal experience in life, between the podcast and my personal experience in life, is that I have a friend. We all come from Africa. I have a friend, and he is leaning towards the GOP. He's a GOP supporter. And he believes that anybody who is a Democrat supports abortion, or is an abortionist. He supports abortion, or he does not believe in God, or his belief system, his belief in God is faulty. I mean, that boggles my mind. So that is a personal experience, because I always tell him that, look, it does not mean that because somebody is a Democrat does not, and therefore that person supports abortion. I gave him an example that of recent, and it just went to news today, that the Supreme Court will take up that case about the abortion law of Louisiana abortion law. They will take up that case. So I gave him that example. I said, the governor of Louisiana is a Democrat, but he signed into bill an anti-abortion law. So does that make him an abortionist? I don't think so. He was dumbfounded. He had nothing to say. So this evening, I have talked to you about, in conclusion, I've talked to you about the Super Soul Conversation, which was organized, a podcast of the Super Soul Conversations, which was done by Oprah Winfrey, where she interviewed Malcolm Gladwell, the revisionist, on his book, Talking to Strangers, the People We Do Not Know. And I've brought to you the main points of the podcast. I have brought to you what was new to me in that podcast. I've brought to you what warrants further study or research on, based on my own reflections. I've talked to you what the connection between that podcast and topics outside of my classroom, what we have studied, and I've given you my personal experience between that podcast and my personal experience. And so these are the things I told you I'll tell you, and these are the things I've told you, and these are the things I've summarized to you. Thank you for listening. Have a blessed day. Thanks. Bye.